All right. Happy Monday morning, everybody. I hope you guys had a good spring break. It looks like we're going to have the weather we wanted to have during spring break this week, right? It's going to be beautiful and sunny all week. Super exciting. Hope you guys are doing well. So, we had this little warm up here just to remind ourselves what we were doing before spring break. And then what we're going to do today or this week, the next couple of days, is we're going to talk about solving after factoring. Okay, so like, why did we do all this factoring stuff in the first place? Okay, and then next week, the week after, we're going to review for our midterm, and we'll get that done. So right now, we're just going to talk about, remind us ourselves about factoring, and then we're going to start our conversation about using the zero product property to solve. Okay, and zero product property is one of the coolest tools in math to solve for things, and so hopefully you guys enjoy it. Okay? All right, so as always, remember, guys, that we can ask questions at any time. You can use chat or you can turn on your mic to ask questions as well. Okay? One other reminder, remember that this is our last week in this format. So we have today and Thursday in our format that we've done before, and then starting next week, right, there's going to be a new format where we see each other 4 times a week instead of twice a week. Okay, so that's going to be starting next week. All right, so let's go ahead and go over this warm up, and so that we can spend a little bit more time talking about zero product property and what that means. Okay, so in the first case here, we're factoring a binomial, right? So there's 2 terms. Well, if there's only 2 terms, then we're not going to be using the box and the x that we're going to be using for trinomials. So when I look at, again, a binomial, 2 terms, what I'm looking for is what's the biggest number that goes into both and how many x's go into both. So the biggest number that goes into both here is going to be 2, right? 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 8 4 times, and then it looks like I have 2 x's here, 1 x here, so that is 1 in common. So remember, right, x squared is x times x, and this is just x, so this just has 1 more multiplied x. So we're going to pull that out, and then it's kind of like a game show, right? We know the answer, we just have to figure out 2x times what gives me the answer. So I take a look here. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. So we don't normally write the 1. And then we have to think, okay, x times what gives x squared? Well, it's x times x. So if I write an x here, 2x times x would give me 2x squared. Then I have to think, look here. Well, 2 times what gives me 8? That's 4. And then there's already an x there, so I can just have 2x times x plus 4. All right, so this is what we have for factoring a 2-term expression. How are we doing with this? Does anybody have questions, any concerns? Yeah. So I definitely, right? So some of you guys are gonna, right? It's gonna be like, man, I forget how to do this stuff. But that makes sense. We just took a week off. So we're going to have to practice doing this and getting back into it, right? So again, we're looking for what number goes both into 2 and 8. Okay, so 2 is the biggest number here. And then once we figure out the number, then we're looking at the letters and we're thinking, okay, what's the most we can pull out? Well, there's 1x here and 2x's here, so I can only pull out the 1. And then we're just working backwards, right? So 2x times what gives me 2x squared? Well, the 2 is going to be there, so 2 times 1 is 2. And then x times x gives me x squared. And then I have 2 times 4 gives me 8, and then I need the x there. So it is hard because we're working backwards, right? And just like walking backwards is harder than walking forwards. Okay, so we're just going to have to keep practicing that and figure that out. Okay. Then here, when we get to a trinomial, we have a different method. We can't just pull out, right? So there's no x term in this last term, right? So we can't just pull out a common factor. So to do these, we did the box system. because we know that we're going to have two numbers that are going to multiply to get 24, and they're going to add to get 14. Do you guys remember doing that, right? They're going to multiply to get 24. Yeah, I mean, it's just distribute. You got it. It's distributive property. That's how you get back to here. That's exactly what that is. Okay, so when we're doing this, right? So again, we found out this pattern with multiplying. That's what we did at the start of this trimester, right? We were multiplying two products, and we found this pattern. And the pattern was this number is the two numbers multiplied, and this number is the two numbers added. So we have a little system of doing this. We go x squared, right? This is our squared term, and then my constant term, I put it down in the right. And then we have, right, just our little x to keep things organized. So I multiply these two numbers. So negative 24x squared. Okay. And then down here, that's my sum. That's my 14x. Right? Because we're looking for two numbers that are going to multiply. So I put a little multiply symbol there. Multiply to negative 24x squared. And they're going to add to 14x. So we have to think, we're going to make a list of everything that multiplies to 24. So what do you guys got? What multiplies to 24? And I'm just going to go ahead and do the easy one, right? Which is 24 times 1. Oops. It helps if I write it 24, though. So what else multiplies to get 24? I think there's a couple of different ones. 6 and 4. Okay, and I can think of one more, right? Ooh, oh gosh, you guys are good. 12 times 2. 8 and 3. Dang, you guys rock. Thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate you guys. And it looks like everyone contributed a little bit there. Okay, so now we have all these multiplications, but then we have to say, hey, this is negative, right? So in order for us to get a negative, one of these numbers out of all of these numbers has to be negative. Well, we take a look at when we're adding. Do you guys see how when we add, we get a net positive? That means that the bigger number always will have to be positive. Okay. So let's try adding all of these now. So 24 minus 1, that's 23. Well, that's not going to work. I need 14. 6 plus negative 4, that is, interesting. 6 plus negative 4, that is, did I intend it to be negative? I did. I wonder if this doesn't have an answer. This would be 2. This would be 10. This would be 5. Uh-oh. Did I make a mistake by making this negative? Let's see, what else gets 24? 2 times 12, I think that's it. Uh-oh. Did I create an impossible problem? Okay. Hey, no, it's really easy. Let's make this a positive. Let's make that a positive. So if we make that a positive 24, then we can make all of these positive. So then what do the adding add up to? So 24 plus 1 would be 25. That still doesn't work. 6 plus 4 is 10. That doesn't work. 12 plus 2, that's 14. There we go. And then 8 plus 3 is 11. That's what I get for, I am adding. So 12 plus 2 would be 14. So they were negative before. So 12 plus a negative would be, you'd subtract. So that would be 10. Okay. So if we make this positive, then this problem works. Yeah, I must have made this before spring break, and my brain must have been tired. So I'm going to have 12x and 2x. So let's double check. Does 12x times 2x equal 24x squared? Yeah, it does. And does 12x plus 2x equal 14x? Yes, it does. So I'm going to put these out like this. It's okay, guys. I made the mistake there, right? I made the mistake there of making that a negative. So then I'm going to have 2 here, right? Because 2 times x is 2x. Then x times 12 is there. So I'm going to have x plus 2 times x plus 12. That's going to be my answer. Okay. So again, we had these 2 ways of factoring. And we're going to be practicing both of these more and more and more. And we're just going to include the zero product property in with these to now that we're going to solve for x, right? So notice how this, we just get like an expression, but now we're going to be able to say, hey, x equals this. Okay, so that's what we're going to add in today. We're going to figure out what does x equal. Okay. All right, and we're going to be spending 2 days on this. Okay, we're going to be spending 2 days on this. All right, so let's take a look. So we're going to be, if you guys are following along in the book, we're going to be in section 7.4, and this is the zero product property. And remember, if you guys forgot what product means multiply. Well, actually, it's the result of multiplication. It's the answer of multiplication. So really, we're going to multiply to get 0. Okay, so that's what that means. Zero product property is multiplied to get 0. So let's just talk about that really quickly. Okay, so what this is in words is if you multiply, so if you multiply two real numbers and it equals 0. Okay, so if you multiply two real numbers and it equals 0. So if you multiply two real numbers and it equals 0, then at least one of the numbers. So if you multiply two real numbers and it equals 0, then at least one of the numbers is 0. Okay, and that's it as words. Okay, so zero product property. If you multiply two real numbers and it equals 0, then at least one of the numbers has to be 0. Okay, and so that's it as words. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to write this down with symbols. So if you have A times B equals 0, then A or B, then A equals 0 or B equals 0. Or both. Okay, so that's the zero product property. And so I hope this makes sense to you guys, right? To get 0, you have to multiply by 0. Multiplying by 0 is the only way to get 0. Okay? Right? You can't multiply any other numbers to get 0. The only way to get 0 is if you multiply by 0. Are you guys okay with that? Right? So 7 times 0 is 0. 0 times anything is 0. And it's the only way we can get nothing. Right? It's the only time that you can multiply. Remember, multiplication is a shortcut for addition. So if you're adding things, the only way to get to 0 is if you have nothing, right? So that's what's going on here, right? You can't add things and get nothing unless you started with nothing. So that's the zero product property. Now, one other thing is sometimes for shorthand, if you don't like writing out zero product property, you can just write ZPP. ZPP is the zero product property. That, and it's fun to say. You can say ZPP. And it's just kind of fun to say. Okay? So, zero product property is when you have two things multiplied to zero, then either A has to be 0 or B has to be 0. And I'm going to show you guys how this all ties in with factoring. Okay? So, how are we doing so far? Did everyone get this down? Does anybody have questions? All right, we're doing okay. So, oh, you're still writing. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to just dive in and do some examples together. And see if this makes sense and see if you guys have any questions, how you're feeling about it. And remember, I love that you guys are asking questions. Lots of great questions, lots of great feedback. I love it when people tell me this is hard. That just means we need more practice with it. So that's really good. Keep that feedback coming, guys. I really appreciate you. All right, so let's do a couple of examples of this. Okay, to make this easy, we're going to start with things in factored form already. So we're going to take out that, so like the warm-up, we had to factor. We're going to start with that already done. So tomorrow we'll work on doing, not tomorrow, Thursday, we'll work on doing it all together, right? So you'll have to factor then solve. So today we're just going to work on solving, okay? So that's what we're doing right now. We're just going to solve for x, okay? So again, if you're still struggling with factoring, we're going to incorporate more of that in next class, okay? So for right now, we're going to do two problems. So for this first one, again, I'm going to start with something that's already factored. Okay, so this is 2x times the quantity of x minus 4 equals 0. So what we're looking for here is we're looking for terms, going through puberty apparently, we're looking for terms that multiply to 0. That is, we have this first term times this second term equals 0. This is the zero product property. Okay? So when we have things that multiply to 0, that's the zero product property. And so we have to remember, if we have two things that multiply to 0, that means either A equals 0 or B equals 0 or both equals 0. So to solve this, this is all you have to do. You just have to recognize, hey, I have two things multiplying to get to 0. The only way to multiply to 0 is you multiply by 0. So that means either, right? So that means either A equals 0 or B equals 0. Well, my A here is 2x. And my B here is x minus 4. Okay, so all we're going to do here is solve for x. Okay, so the zero product property says that anytime you have two things multiply to get to 0, that means either either of the two terms can be 0. So we have two terms here. So it's going to be 2x equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. And that's it. We've used the zero product property. So this whole step right here is the zero product property, getting from the black to the red. Okay. So now that we've used the zero product property, all we need to do is solve for x. Okay. So to solve for x, all I'm going to do here is I have 2 times x. Right, I want to get x by itself, so if it's 2 times x, the opposite of multiply is divide. Okay, so I have x equals, and then 0 divided by 2, that's 0. right? We can't divide by 0, but 0 divided by anything is nothing, right? So think of it. If I have no pizza and I try to split it up into 2, it's still nothing, right? Or if I have no Snickers bar and I want to split it with you, we both get no Snickers, right? So that's what that means right there. Okay, so we have x equals 0, or, and then to do this one, it's x minus 4. So the opposite of minus is add. So I'm going to get x equals 4. Now, those are our two answers. That's it. Okay, so we have two answers here. So x equals 0 or x equals 4. And we can double check this if you ever are like, hey, are these answers correct? Right? So let's take a look. If I have 0, right? So that would be like, so here I'm just checking my work. We don't always have to do this. Times 0 times 0 minus 4. So 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. And then 0 times negative 4 is 0. That checks out. Okay, so this is a true statement. So again, I'm just showing that you can check your work. And then if I plug in a 4, I get 2 times. And then I can go 4. Okay. So 2 times 4 is 8. 4 minus 4 is 0. 8 times 0 is 0. So we can see that they both are correct. They both give us an answer, right? It equals 0. Right? And the reason why we have two answers is because we have two terms, and there's a different way to get each term to 0. How you guys doing with that example? We doing okay? Anybody have questions? Anybody? And thank you guys for the feedback. I really appreciate it. It helps me know what you guys are going through. Right? And this little extra work down here at the bottom, right? This was optional, right? This little extra stuff down here below the answer. I just did that to show you guys, hey, if you ever are like unsure, you can always check your answer. Okay? So if you're ever unsure, you can always check your answer. All right, let's do another one. Let's do another one. So this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to look a little bit different. So I have the quantity of x minus 3 and the quantity of x minus 9. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I have two terms. So I have a times b, and that equals 0. So this is the 0 product property, right? I have two things multiplying to get to 0. So hopefully by the end of this, you guys are going to have a trained eye. You're going to look for, oh, I have two things multiplying to 0. I can use 0 product property. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that either my first term equals 0, or my second term, oops, I don't need to put parentheses, my second term equals 0. Okay, so either my first term equals 0 or my second term equals 0. So then I go ahead and I solve for x, right? Here, I can write that down here. So I'm going to solve for x. I'm a little off. There we go. So I can solve for x now. Right? So again, from black to red, that's the 0 product property. I recognize that two things multiplying to 0, that one or both have to be 0. So I'm going to go plus 3 on both sides. So I get x equals 3. Or, and then here I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Again, I'm always doing the opposite. So I get x equals 9. Okay, so you can see, and hopefully you guys see this, is that the hard part is going to be the factoring, right? Once they're factored, solving them is really easy, right? It's just one additional step at the end. But what we're going to really have to, right? So today we're just going to be focusing on factoring. I mean, not factoring. We're just going to be focusing on zero product property. And then next class, we're going to be focusing on factoring and then using the zero product property. Okay. So with our first example done, does anybody have questions? I'm gonna have you guys try some on your own now. You guys want to try some on your own? Okay. Well, let's try some on our own to see what you guys, right? See where we get stuck, because we're gonna get stuck, and it's just a matter of how do we get unstuck. Okay, so here we go. So this is try on your own. Okay, so I want you to solve. I'm going to give you guys 2 to do. Okay. And B is going to be so try those both out. I don't think we need a lot of time. I bet you guys could do these in a couple of minutes. Okay, so we're just going to set these up and solve them. Okay, so use zero product property to set each term equal to 0 and solve. All right, was that enough time, guys? Was that enough time, everybody? Okay. So, I can give you a little bit more. All right. We're going to go over this. If you didn't quite finish, pay attention because this we shouldn't be taking longer than 3 minutes to do this. And I'll show you what's going on here. So again, we have two things multiplying to get 0, right? So we're going to use the zero product property. That is the first term equals 0 or the second term equals 0, right? This is the zero product property. Okay. So I have 3 times x. The opposite of multiply is divide. So I get x equals 0. And then the opposite of subtract is add. So I get x equals 6. Okay, and those are the two answers for the first one. Okay, so again, if you have two things multiply to get to 0, you just set each term equal to 0, and then you solve. So there's two answers there. Okay, for the next one, the same thing. I have two terms multiplying to get 0. So that means x plus 5 equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. You subtract 5. So x equals negative 5. And then we have x plus 4. So we get x equals 4. Okay, and these are my two answers here. Okay, and the reasons why there's two answers, right, is because there's two possible things that can be 0, right? The first term can be 0 or the second term can be 0. All right, and how are you guys doing with that? Did we do okay? You guys feeling okay with this? Okay, well, we're going to go ahead now and do a couple of more challenging problems. Okay, and I want you guys to try these out and see how they go. Okay, so again, we're going to do a little bit more challenging. Okay, so here is our next round of examples. So this is going to be a little harder. Okay, so let's do this first one. So this first one is going to be 2x plus 7 and 2x minus 7. So I want you guys to go ahead and solve for x there. Okay, so again, set this up and solve for 0. No decimals, just keep things as fractions. No decimals. If you're finding decimals, you're doing way too much work. You don't need a calculator to do this. All right, so let's go over this. Let's take a look at this. So we got two things multiplying to 0. So that means 2x plus 7 equals 0 or 2x minus 7 equals 0, right? This is the zero product property. Okay, so then we go ahead and solve. So remember, we do multiplication and division last. We do addition, subtraction first. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So I got 2x equals negative 7. Okay, so I get rid of addition and subtraction first. And then here, I have 2 times x. So the opposite of multiply is divide. So I get x equals negative 7 halves. Okay, and see, you don't have to worry about a thing. Just leave it as a fraction. This is why fractions are great, because they're easier to deal with. Okay, Then we're going to do the same thing over here. So this time, though, it's a minus 7. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And then I'm going to get 2x equals positive 7. And then it says 2 times x. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiply. I'm going to divide. And I get x equals 7 halves. Again, we don't want decimals because that just makes more work. Okay? So by throwing in, right? By throwing in a number there, I have one more step, right? So instead of just adding or subtracting, I now added, subtracted, and divided. Okay? So we just had one little extra step. How are you guys feeling about that? Was that okay? Again, like a little bit harder, right? Because we had to do a little bit extra work, right? We had to add, subtract. And which means anytime that we add more steps, right? That just means more chances for us to make a little mistake, right? So that's just why we got to keep practicing it. Okay. All right, so let's go B. So our next one is going to be x minus 1 quantity squared equals 0. Okay. So I want you guys to try this one on your own. Now remember, when something is squared, that means times itself, right? So you might want to write this out as, right? It might be helpful to think squared. So it's going to be something times something, right? I'm just giving you a heads up there, right? So if it's squared, that means it's times itself. So you might want to write it out as 2 factors to get you started. Here, I should put up a little timer, shouldn't I? All right. So again, squared means something times itself. So x minus 1 squared is x minus 1 times x minus 1. So it's just multiplied by itself. So if you see a term squared, you have to remember that really means 2 things multiplied. So this means that x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 1, minus 1 equals 0. Okay? So to solve these, I would go plus 1, and we're going to go x equals 1, and then here we're going to add 1, and we get x equals 1. Holy moly! So this is called a repeat answer. Okay, this is called a repeat answer. That is, x equals 1 is the same answer as x equals 1. So you might be like, oh, no big deal. But later on, this is a big deal. Okay? So this actually means something when you guys are going to be in Algebra 2. So for right now, I'm going to just say x equals 1. There's only one answer. But it's important to know that it was repeated. Because when you're graphing these, it turns out that this means something is going to happen. It's going to... we call it a kiss. And I'll show you what I mean by this. This would actually look like this. Okay? So the graph, it kisses at x equals 1 like that. And that's what that means. Okay? It means it's a kiss. Whereas this over here, and you guys don't really need to know this right now. So if I have 7 halves and I have negative 7 halves, this graph would look like this. Okay, so see how this one goes through those 2 points and this one just touches. We call that a kiss, an x-axis kiss, where it just kisses the x-axis and then goes up. Okay, so you don't need to know right now that this is a repeat answer. You just need to know, hey, if they both are the same answer, you really only have one answer. Okay, but later on, it will be important for you to know that it's a repeat. Okay, so for right now, just one answer. Okay, but just keep it in your mind like, hey, they both equaled x equals 1. That's going to mean something to me later on, okay? Cool. How are we doing, guys? We got a few more to do, and then class is going to be over, right? Class goes by super quick, doesn't it? Okay. So now let's take a look at this next one. I'm going to see if you guys can do this one on your own. So I got the quantity of x plus 1, and then the quantity of x minus 3, and then the quantity of x minus 2. Okay, and to give you guys like a hint on this one, how many answers do you think there will be? So how many answers do you think there will be? Yeah. So think about this one. So this time we have 3 things multiplying to get 0, right? So 1 or all of them could be 0, right? So we have 3 things multiplying to get to 0. We're going to solve it just like we would if there were 2. So give this a try. See what you get. All right, so let's take a look at this. So what's going on here? So we have 3 terms multiplying to get to 0, right? We can think of this as A times B times C equals 0. That's still the 0 product property. We can have as many of these terms as we want, but if you have all multiplication and the answer is 0, then any one of these has to be 0. So how do we set up and solve this? So we're going to have x plus 1 equals 0. We're going to have x minus 3 equals 0. And we're going to have x minus 2 equals 0. So we're going to solve all 3 of these. So at the beginning, if you guessed, hey, there's 3 terms, there's going to be 3 answers, then you're correct. So I'm going to have minus 1 here. So I'm going to have x equals negative 1. Right? This is minus 3, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I'm going to have x equals 3. And then I'm going to then here I have x minus 2, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get x equals 2. And these are all my answers. I have 3 answers. Okay. So we're going to end class with a couple of practice problems to see how you guys are doing. Okay, so let's, does anybody have questions before we get going? We're going to put all of this together starting next class. And then next week, we're going to spend next week getting ready for the midterm. So we're going to be 4 periods four days a week next week. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, we're going to study for the midterm, and then Friday, we're going to take the midterm in class. So I'm going to have you guys practice a few of these on your own. And that's how we'll close out class. Okay. So these are some try on your own. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to have 4x plus 5. So we're going to solve, right? Solve for x. So 4x plus 5 times 3x minus 6. Okay, so there's your first one. And then your second one, I'm going to have you guys do x plus 6 quantity squared equals 0. So I want you to solve both of those, and that's how we're going to finish up class today. Oh, we should give you a little bit more time to do that. All right, let's go over these. So again, we have two terms in this first one equals 0. So that's going to be 4x plus 5 equals 0. And then I'm also going to have 3x minus 6 equals 0. So for this first one, I'm going to undo addition and subtraction first. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I get 4x equals negative 5. And then this is 4 times x. So I'm going to divide by 4, not by 2, by 4. So I get x equals negative 5/4. So right, you just leave it as a fraction. Over here, I'm going to get rid of addition and subtraction first. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I get 3x equals 6. I divide by 3. Hey, in this case, 3 does go into 6, right? 3 goes into 6 twice. So those are my two answers there. So I have negative 5/4 and 2. So make sure you check your answer that, right? You should have that negative. Okay. And then here, we have to remember that this is x plus 6 times x plus 6, right? So I'm going to have x plus 6 equals 0 and x plus 6 equals 0. Do you see how they're the same, right? So this is going to be a repeat answer. So if I subtract 6 from both sides, I get x equals negative 6 and x equals negative 6. I just need to write that once. You don't need to write them twice. So that is a repeat answer. Okay, so that takes us to 9:50. Please remember, guys, I have office hours. This is the last week I have office hours in the morning. So if you guys need help, you can come in morning before school starts. And then, yeah, I'll see you guys Thursday. Take care, everybody.